Welcome back to Level Headed Gamer. My name is Joseph. Today I want to do something special for any Outrider fan. I want to compile for all 4 classes, all 8 abilities for each character, and kind of go through each one and what are the stats and what it's going to do in general. And if there's accompanying gameplay, I'm going to put that along as well so you can see it. As well as I'm going to start with a skill tree to give you an idea how skill trees are going to work, and I'll just do it for Technomancer, but the idea is similar for multiple classes, so you can get an idea of what's going to be going on and how you should proceed in general. Without any further ado, let's get into it. I will timestamp each character for you just so you can get to the one that you like if that's what you want to do. So I want to talk about the skill tree. In the skill tree, you can see every node just kind of adds, up health, up anomaly power, or weapon damage, whatever it may be. But it also has ones that reduces the cooldown by 15%, and sometimes it looks like it also might increase the power of certain abilities as well, not just the cooldown like this. And in general, it will kind of guide you towards what kind of abilities you're trying to use. But there's also an interesting node like this. Check this out. I'm going to pause it here. Increase your sniper weapon damage by 40%. Sniper weapons will drop 12% more often. Guys, I've never seen this being done before. This is a really cool way of making, first of all, the grind more interesting, so you're getting weapons that you want, not something that you're not looking for at all. That happens so much in Division, in Destiny, all the time. I'm getting weapons I'm not looking for. And here you can direct by a skill tree to where you want it to go. And I can see how mixing and matching is going to be really interesting. Even the way they set up the skill trees, Pestilence, Tech Shaman, and Demolisher, they play along with together. Like Pestilence and Tech Shaman, you can go into one into another and kind of mix and match. This is going to be really interesting how it really is going to work out in the end and when people get really creative with their builds. Starting with the Technomancer, we're going to go with the first skill that you're going to receive, and it's going to be Scrapnel. It's basically something we've seen already before. You throw a proximity mine and the explosion deals 2,987 damage, and it has an interrupt ability for the enemies that are caught within the blast, which could be quite useful to interrupt bosses or characters or whatever it may be. Moving on to the second ability you're going to receive is a Cryo Turret. There's barely any gameplay, but I think I can find some for you here and I'll display it. But you place an automated turret that deals 85 damage, but the benefit here is it inflicts freeze onto enemies, and the turret's health depletes slowly over time, and if it takes damage as well. Going on to the third ability, we're going to go to Pain Launcher. This one we've seen all over the place. It's one of the staple ones they've shown. Basically, you put a launcher that shoots a bunch of missiles and bombs an area in front of you. Each missile dealing 359 damage per hit and interrupts enemy skills again. I think this is going to be a harder skill to use because it's just it carpet bombs an area. It's not homing. So you'll have to kind of either time it or put people into a cold snap and then use the Pain Launcher. Going on to the fourth ability, the Blighted Rounds. Each of the character classes have something very similar, but basically fills your current weapon magazine with DK-infused bullets that inflict toxic onto enemies. Enemies within a small radius of the main target also receive toxic and 50% damage. The skill lasts until you reload or switch weapons. Like I said, every single class has volcanic rounds. They have Devastator has his own type of rounds. They all have this similar ability because it seems like it's going to be a useful thing to utilize and up your character's status effect. Going on to Tools of Destruction. Again, it's something we've seen many times. If you press the button, you get a rocket launcher. If you hold the button, you get a minigun. And the rocket launcher is able to interrupt. That's the big benefit that's going to have. So again, if there's a boss doing massive damage, you might not do a whole lot of damage, but at the very least, you will interrupt him. And at the same time, the turret doesn't have any interrupt skill, but it does do a whole lot of damage over the time that you're using the magazine. So it's kind of damage over time ability, so to say. Going on to the next ability, we got Fixing Wave. Again, Technomancer is the only character who can heal others in this game. So this is going to be a very useful support skill. And let's see exactly. It releases energy to restore 33% health of all players and 50% health of your turrets, which I actually didn't know myself, which is really cool in case you want to get your turret up and running for much longer than it is. Going on to the next abilities, again, it's one of the first ones they've shown, and it's a gadget basically that freezes enemies within the large radius around you, which I think you can kind of put it together with Pain Launcher and then Carpet Bomb an area. I think is going to be very useful. I can see myself already using the Pain Launcher and the Cold Snap together, and I don't know what the third ability would be yet. Last one is the Blighted Round. Again, something we've seen many times before. And you place an automated turret that deals 138 damage, a little bit more than the Cryo, but it also inflicts Toxic. The turret's health depletes slowly over time, and when it comes, or if it takes damage. So that's, again, it's an interesting combination, how you'll be able to put some skills together. I can already see how Shrapnel will probably work with Cold Snap or Pain Launcher or Shrapnel. You can kind of set up different abilities here. But as just a fan of Technomancer, I think Tool Destruction is going to be definitely the way to go. Now, let's move on to the Devastator and on all the abilities he's going to have. The first one is Earthquake. It releases a shockwave that deals a little over 1200 damage and interrupts all enemies in front of you. Again, that's any interrupt skill in general is going to be pretty sweet, kind of stopping the damage going towards you, and at the same time setting up other people maybe in your team or even yourself for more damage on this character. With the second ability, Golem, is to fortify yourself with 65% of income damage for 8 seconds. I think he's the only character who has a protective shield of sorts, except for the Trickster with the bubble that he's able to create. The third ability is going to be Gravity Leap. This is one of the more the visually impressive skills to me in general, because it's pretty cool the way he leaps up into the air and drops down. But you leap into the air and strike your targets from above, dealing 2,413 damage and interrupting all enemies within a small radius of the area. It seems like, again, something they've stressed, but it looks like Devastator is going to be very high on interrupt in general. The fourth ability we're getting here is a Reflect Bullets. Again, one of the staples of this character. He creates a barrier to capture all enemy projectiles, accumulates the damage after 10 seconds, triggering the skill to accumulate damage to reflect back at enemies in front of you. But the enemy also protects you against melee and reflecting some damage back as well. Again, I think this is going to be one of those skills a must-have skill for the Devastator. Impale. Select one target to interrupt their skill and inflict bleed and deal 2,413 damage. If the damage is lethal, the enemy will be impaled, creating a zone that grants a powerful bonus to armor and health regeneration to all allies in range of 9 seconds. That little detail about Impale, actually, I didn't know myself, and I thought it was right away really cool. And I think Impale is going to be kind of a weak ability at first until you're able to impale multiple characters at once, or multiple enemies, at once. I think then it's going to be just completely brutal. Going on to this ability, which I think they've renamed it a couple times, but the one I found that I kind of decided to use, it seemed like from a more recent video, this ability is called Tremor. And what it's going to do is it creates a series of explosions around you, each dealing 302 damage and draining 197 health from enemies within a medium radius around you. There's a couple of characters that are able to pull enemies in or deal a little damage to gain a little bit of health. Pyromancer also has that as well. So they have similar skills, just visually different in their own way, with slight differences as well. Moving on to the 7th ability, Boulder Dash. For sure, that's his coolest looking ability. They showed it off when they were showing off the Legendary Armor Week, and that was really cool how you're able to even jump over obstacles to get to your enemy. And what it exactly does is charge forward to interrupt all enemies in your path and deal just about 2,000 damage. And at the end of the charge, you will smash the ground and deal another 2,000 damage to all enemies within a small radius around you. For sure, that's going to be a really good ability to close in, to do some damage and just keep going ham on everybody around you. The last ability, Endless Mass, which I haven't seen a lot of because, you know, it's the last ability. There's not a lot of gameplay on it. But you select a target to encase in stone, inflicting bleed and pulling enemies within a small radius together to the initial target. The stone will explode, dealing 453 damage to all enemies with a small radius of the target. The damage is not crazy. It's the bleed effect that we should kind of focus on, because again, you're just making the enemies around you vulnerable and you're pulling them into a small area, which you of course can kind of combine with any one of his other abilities, or set it up for your teammates to kind of do some massive damage. Let's move on to Pyromancer. Guys, this is one of the classes I was not least excited about, but I wasn't thinking about playing with him. But the more information I find out, especially going through the skills that he has, he's becoming more and more attractive to me with each passing day. But let's go through his skills. The first one being Heat Wave. Summon a fiery wave that deals 170 damage and inflict burn to enemies in your path, which is great for this character because he heals from burning enemies, as well as doing some damage and making them weak by having the burn status effect on them as well. Moving on to Feed the Flame. Now, we haven't seen much of this ability. It's here and there for a couple seconds, but basically what it does is you pull in enemies toward you, dealing 485 damage while draining 242 health, and finally inflicting ash on those enemies. I'm sure we'll be able to kind of increase the radius of this ability with certain armors or even skill tree, so it's going to be interesting how powerful really and useful this ability is going to be. Moving on to Thermal Bomb. Thermal Bomb we've seen many times, where you select an enemy to burn and interrupt and deal 114 damage, which is not a lot, but if you kill him by afflicted by this skill, the enemy will explode, causing almost 1,000 damage in a large radius. And we've already seen that there's certain legendary armor that's able to spread this effect to multiple enemies again, which can kind of result into being some crazy amounts of damage AoE going on here. Moving on to the next ability, we got Overheat. Overheat deals 31 damage to all enemies in a large radius and interrupts their skills. Enemies affected with burn receive 393 damage instead, and the burn will be consumed, which means it's kind of, you have to combine the skill with something that causes burn to really push it over the edge and make it something truly unique. Moving on to what I was talking about, volcanic rounds, that each character has something of the sort here. Fill your current weapon mag with anomaly infused bullets that will inflict burn with a small radius and pierce targets, damaging enemies behind them. The skill lasts until you reload or switch weapons. Again, it's self-explanatory because this is very similar across all characters. Moving on to Ash Blast, one of the staple moves of this character. Create an anomaly blast to inflict ash on all enemies in a large radius around you. And again, this just going to weaken them and immobilize them at the same time, and you can combine it with other skills to kind of just go really crazy at them. At the same time, you can immobilize characters to freeze them in place so that you can set them up for a heat wave. Going on to the next one is Phaser Beam. Well, not a lot is seen on this particular ability. I'll try to find the best footage I can for you guys, but it looks pretty freaking sweet. Fire an enemy beam that deals 524 damage, inflict burn, and causing interrupt to enemies hit by the beam, as well as enemies with a small radius of you. I don't know how useful that's going to be in general. I think it's going to be more of if you're trying to maximize your damage instead of going for an AoE build. So I think this is where it's going to be more useful. This is one ability. The next ability we got here, Eruption. We haven't got a lot of it. I don't think there's any footage that nobody even highlighted it. You know, any YouTuber playing this game has even highlighted this ability yet for some reason. But Eruption, we've gotten to kind of, from all the information I was able to dig up, what it does is creates a volcanic eruption beneath a selected enemy, dealing damage to them and all enemies within a small radius around the target. I'm gonna assume it's gonna look something as cool as this photo. That's why I picked this photo in general. Now, the last character we got here of the day is going to be probably my main, is the Trickster. Now, we're going to go first with the first ability we've seen many times, Temporal Blade. Paralyze and slice enemies in front of you, dealing 3,218 damage, inflicting slow and interrupt to all characters. Bread and butter move, 100% of this character. I almost can't see any build without it, but we'll see what kind of builds people create once the game actually comes out. Moving on to the second ability is Slow Trap. Create a space-time anomaly sphere that inflicts slow onto enemies and projectiles for 10 seconds. We've seen this one, visually really striking, 100% going to be useful. Not to mention what they don't say, you're able to make this ability in such a way that you can't die within this bubble. Now imagine if you're able to cast this bubble almost indefinitely. You're inside the bubble, you know, slowing down all the bullets, and you can't die in it. This is going to be pretty freaking cool in general. Going on to the third ability is Hunt the Prey. Select an enemy and teleport behind them and receive 500 shield bonus. We also know there's certain legendary armor that will also cause an explosion as you teleport towards the enemy. Again, making this skill even more useful than it is already. Going on to Twisting Rounds. So the variation this character has is fill your current magazine with anomaly infused bullets that increase the firepower by slightly over 1800, and the skill lasts you until you reload or switch weapons. Again, pretty freaking cool that every single character is able to inflict their status effect with an ability that gives you the rounds. But again, we'll see how useful this really is. But I find the next skill to be very, very cool because we haven't seen much of it. As a matter of fact, the guy I took it from, Forzenballz, literally skimmed over it and didn't stop on it. Because if some, people kind of forget, they're not able to stop on every ability, they don't know exactly what people want. But I was able to freeze frame it and kind of, understand what it's going to do here. Create a whirlwind of anomaly blades that deal 393 damage and interrupt onto enemies with a small radius, and you and every hit that lasts for 5 seconds. Damage interrupt. It's hard to tell how useful this is going to be. I think it's going to be a good substitute for Temporal Blade because it's going to be an up close and personal kind of move. So it almost doesn't make sense to have both of them at the same time unless you're really creating the crazy up and close in your face kind of build, but I really don't see that being the case at all. Moving on to Borrowed Time, an ability we've seen many times. You receive over just about 1200 shield and mark your location for 28 seconds. Triggering the skill again will bend space and time and teleport you back to the marked spot. Again, it's going to be interesting. I've said this many times, but the Trickster seems like to be the most, for the lack of a better word, tricky to play with, and he's going to involve a lot more skill. I think he's going to be a higher difficulty character to master than others. But moving on to the next one we got, there is some gameplay footage of this, and I'll try to find it for you. It doesn't seem that crazy to me, but let's again go through it again. Throw a temporal knife at an enemy. The blade will ricochet between maximum of 5 enemies with a small radius, dealing just about 450 damage, and marking all of them marking them. All marked targets will inflict by slow for 10 seconds, and if the first damage dealt, you will be doubled. It sounds good on paper. Let's put it this way. This ability sounds good on paper, but even from the gameplay I've seen a lot of YouTubers kind of use it and click off it very quickly because maybe we're not finding a lot of use for it yet. The one thing about it is the cooldown is very quick, so maybe that's how you're gonna play it in, especially maybe with certain abilities, certain armors or weapons that are gonna make this ability even more useful. We'll see how it goes. The last ability we got here is Time Rift. Create a shockwave that suspends enemies in the air, leaving them unable to fight for 3.5 seconds and inflicts weakness. It's kind of similar if you think about it, it's just like Impale, but it doesn't do any damage. It just gives you a chance to do a whole lot of damage to them by weakening them. What I'm starting to notice also going through all these abilities is a lot of these characters have very similar affecting abilities, but they do make the effort to make them look different, which is really nice. So here we go, guys. That was all the abilities, all 8 abilities for each of the classes, just as I promised you. But I tried to make it very quick and easy without going into too much detail because I don't want to waste your time. We can have other videos as the demo comes out and the game comes out. We can really discuss how each of the abilities will synergize, and that's going to be really interesting to see. This game really is looking to be something special, so much so it put me on the looter shooter binge. I'm going through Division again and Borderlands and just having so much fun because I can't wait for this game. It's going to be really exciting. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you subscribe down below. Leave a comment and let me know what you thought of this. Did you find this useful? If you find Eruption gameplay, the skill, or some of the other skills that we don't know, we haven't seen gameplay of, if you can find some, that'd be great. I'll put them to my next video and I'll give you credit. But guys, enjoy the rest of your day. Take care and peace.